Today we're going to be talking about working on some project management. I've been busy kind of doing a lot of story, a lot of world design, but I'm starting to get to the point where I've got a lot of stuff floating around. Now I'd like to start keeping track a little bit more of this project management side of things. As well as I want to try to keep these streams a little shorter. We're going to try to keep it to around 20 minutes, 25. Just they're getting a little long lately, and I want to keep them a little more hyper focused on certain tasks, on certain goals. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set my alarm and hopefully end around the 20-25 minute mark. So let's get started. So for project management, we're going to be using Trello for a lot of this. I just love Trello. It's great. It's simple. It works well. And it's free and it's easy to use. Free is beneficial, obviously, but Trello just is simple, and I like that. So here we go. We're in our board. I've made some initial columns already. I'd done this a little while ago. Ideas, backlog, current iteration, doing, and QA, as well as a done list. Not sure I'm going to stick with this, but that's where I'm going to start right now. So one of the first things I want to talk about going into this. So this isn't going to be a course on project management or anything like that. Just kind of my way of doing things. I like to start very high level and then kind of work my way down. But before I even do that, I like to form kind of like a timeline in my head of how I want this project to be broken up. And so where I'm going to start with that is kind of one of the first things I wanted to get done. So in my timeline, kind of some of the first things I wanted to get done, and this I guess would be kind of the current iteration, would be develop the main premise, the main story / premise. And I will just stick with main story, which I've got. I've got that done already, and we can actually, I guess we could link to it. Well, we'll link to it here from their story doc. Copy link location. Oops, that's not what I wanted. And it's not going to work. All right, well, that's news to me. I'm pretty certain it's not going to let me Dropbox it. I guess this is the downside to using one of these dedicated apps. Oh, there we go. Link name, story. Perfect, there we go. We can worry about that later. Essentially, this task is to figure out the main story for the game. I mean, it's pretty simple. Simple, not hard. So my timeline kind of goes like this. Develop a story, then once we have kind of this story, because a story really can fit in almost any world, like a core story can almost fit into any environment, any world. And so I want to start kind of with that story. Now I understand that stories can have very specific world elements to them. And that's something that's really detail based. And since we want to stick with a very simple story premise here of this grandpa and his birthday and getting out, that type of a thing, we're going to keep very simple. Obviously, we're going to get into a lot more detail with each particular world, like the different mini stories within that world. We're going to get into that. And even for this first world, we're probably going to have some sort of a mini premise, mini story that's going to expand into the, that's going to give you an immediate goal to accomplish. And we haven't figured that out yet, but we do need to decide what that is. So develop the main story, maybe that's a overarching story. . There we go. Overarching. Probably best to leave it as a dash. Overarching story. So we do kind of have that. We've got that. You know, it's done. The main story is done. Right? I guess we can cheat and move it over here. But so that's there. But we have a card for it. We have it listed. We're actually going to do some tagging too. I love to do tagging. Let's do some editing labels. I've got art code. It's going to go under. We have design and we have story. So we have two different things. I'm going to go with this, and I'm going to call orange going to be story. And actually, I'm going to use Pinkford instead. It'll attract my eye a little bit more. The next thing I want to do, so we've got to design the first, we figure out the overarching story. Then we kind of start figuring out, okay, what's kind of the main story I want to accomplish in this first world? Well, what are the main goals for this first world? So, so we need to develop, so I guess really what I'm trying to say is we need to develop what the story is going to be for this first world. So, develop story for first world, which I believe for develop story for first world, we are calling it Mossboro. Whether that sticks or not, that's just what it's going to be right now. And we're going to give a label of story. And what this really is going to be is determine main goals / points to get across to the player when they're venturing around. That's really the whole point of a story, is to get across some goal, some aspect. I mean, I guess it's kind of about design too, but so create story for Mossboro world. And then determine the main goal points that I want to get across to the player. And that's almost dealing with design. I don't think I have one yet. By the way, I've changed the name of it from Gopher to Gopher Town. Just a beta name. It doesn't really matter much. Mossboro, so I've got a list here of Mossboro. This is a little bit more about design, it looks like, than storytelling. So we're going to leave that. So we want to develop these stories. So we design this overarching story. We know what that is. Now we design a little story within that world, and that story isn't necessarily going to determine how we design the game, but also how we design the game is going to determine the story. They really go hand in hand. They need to be melded together. And so we have develop story from us, and then also develop gameplay for Mossboro. So I want my story to kind of be the point man leading the direction for the world, but I don't want my story to necessarily dictate the gameplay, because if my story says, let's have a wheelchair race, and I design a wheelchair race gameplay and it's terrible, then we're not going to keep it. So they kind of go hand in hand. So develop gameplay, and that's going to go under my label for design. And this actually develop gameplay / environment for Mossboro. And so this is actually going to go under a couple labels. It's going to go under this. It's also going to go under art, design and art. And we're going to save it, and we're going to link it to our and we're going to attach it there as Mossboro design doc. I had this one. Oops. I had this one. story arc. That's a better way to do it. Arch. Gotta love it. Arc. Develop in story arc. Alright. Develop story arc for Mossboro. Alrighty. We're getting there. We're definitely getting places. Develop gameplay environment for Mossboro. Okay, so again, a lot of what we're doing is it's very early pre-production stuff, and that's just where we're at. We have already tested. I still haven't shown it. I really need to sit down and show it. Is the actual gameplay, the core gameplay, which is the using your finger to drag your player around to collect things, essentially. In this case, collect your gophers, your relatives. And that is fun. I've tested it with with various people, and they enjoy it. They thought it was really cool, very natural feeling and such. So I do need to get to showing that for you guys. But so the idea here, this timeline I'm creating is story, world development, character development. They kind of go hand in hand, character development. Then after we've kind of got that established, we do some art direction. We kind of establish like the art style I want to go for, the perspective of the game. Right now I'm debating. I like to stick in 2D because it's going to be easier, and I'll probably build a chunk of the game out in 2D. But at the end of the day, I do kind of want to dip my toe into some 3D, maybe do like a 2.5D or 3D perspective, 3D angled perspective of the game. I think that'd be kind of cool. But that's a boatload more work. So we'll see. Since I'm not a huge 3D modeler, that will be interesting and fun, but it'd be a great learning experience, and it might be worth the time. So, but we'll see. So we've got that going. Design, do like arts and environment, kind of that feel, and that's going to evolve. It isn't necessarily that these pieces are set in stone as I go through them, but I have to start somewhere, and it's a good place to start in this. Once I have the art style direction, then I can kind of sit down and start working on the coding and the programming side and saying, okay, the design dictates that I need this sort of gameplay at this point, so I need to go build out these systems to support that gameplay. And then we'll get into more coding and such, and then as the gameplay functionality features come together and start working and functionally good, then I have to say, all right, now I need some animation, some art to layer on top. It's game development. It's layers upon layers. The first layer, in my opinion, is the first layer is the story. The second layer is the game world itself. The third layer would be the characters, but they'd be kind of part of the same layer with the game world. Not just the environment, but the characters. Then the next layer would be the environment, character would be the art, and the perspective and such. And then the layer on top of that would be the programming systems. And the layer on top of that, a little backwards, design. And then after design is the programming systems. And then the art is on top of that. And then on top of the art is the animation. And so on and so forth. And then on top of that is polish and, particles and special effects and all that extra stuff. You get to these more and more superficial layers as you go higher. And that's not to insult artists or anything. What they do is beyond talented. It's unbelievable, quite honestly. And when I see games that these artists have built, and when I just see any art in general, it's mind-boggling. It's probably something I'll never get to that level, but it's amazing. So I'm not trying to say that what they do is superficial or wrong. It's just you got to have the core game mechanic established before you can even start to approach the art. And there are lots of games where they are art heavy and the gameplay is lax, and I find that those games kind of go off a little easier, but you don't last as long playing them. I like to reference like Donkey Kong Country, some of the old classics. You could play those for hours and hours on end. They didn't have the most amazing art in the world. They were pretty good. They didn't have the most amazing art in the world, but you could play them for hours and hours because the gameplay lent itself to it. So I really do think gameplay is very core to games. I think story is important too. A decent story is important. It doesn't have to be crazy plot twists and stuff. Some games do, but for the type of game we're making, I don't want crazy plot twists and stuff like that. I just want a good, simple, basic story that supports the world and the characters, as well as the characters in the world supporting the story. So they really got to go hand in hand and mesh together. So our first layer, we got our stories down. So I need to develop the main story, done. Need to develop the story for Mossboro, that's still not done, but that's going to be in the works. Develop gameplay and environment for Mossboro. So these really kind of need to go into the doing portion, as that's what's going on for it. I've been developing the environment first instead of the story. I might have to backtrack and go back and visit the story, but we'll see. So we've got the development of the story, we got the game design. Next is, after the environment and the story, is build supporting, gameplay. Well, I guess the next after the gameplay and the environment is to actually prototype the world. So build out map of the world, map of Mossboro. I totally spelled that one. Build out map of Mossboro. That's really what we want to do. That kind of goes hand in hand with gameplay, but it's more of design. So we want to do design. That's what it is. And then after we have a map, kind of a layout and organization of how all the pieces go together, the organization will play into the story will play into the organization, and the gameplay environment will play into the organization, the map. Once we have that, we'll do a prototype, or well, this is where you could go either way. You could start working on the systems that support the gameplay, or you could start working on the map, which I just realized my pointer is invisible. I'm not necessarily sure what's going on with that. Interesting. So anyways, so we can either focus on building out the gameplay systems to support the world, or we can prototype out the actual world itself and actually walk through the world and then start adding the systems on. I think I'm going to lean towards kind of building out the systems first. It's not something I always do. I kind of like to build up the world first, but I want to build up the systems because I want to take a more gameplay heavy approach. So that suddenly the gameplay doesn't work, I suddenly have to trash a whole chunk of a level I've already blocked out. So I'm going to do prototype out the gameplay systems. And that's definitely going to be more of a coding thing. And I'm actually going to change this. Yes. When I think of coding, I think of more, I'm actually going to go with the light blue. I think more of a blue. I don't know, I guess that's just how it's worked before. Prototype out the gameplay systems, and then block out Mossboro. Alright, that'll be our next task. And that's a little bit of a design. I'd say that's more design. After we block out Mossboro and we have the systems in place, then we'll actually start assembling the level together. Assemble or maybe assemble Mossboro. And what I mean by assemble is it's going to involve coding and design. And so let's edit this description real quick and say assemble means put gameplay systems into the Mossboro world. So it is, and it's starting to connect all the pieces together. Again, these are very high level. Blockout will be layout Moss using And one thing I realized I forgot to mention in here was when I was talking about blocking out Mossboro was transitions. One of the key things is, so I'm going to block this out, but one of the things that actually needs to be built before I can do that blocking out is screen transitions, a screen transition system. So screen, and you know what? Actually, screw that. Screw that. No, that's our 20-minute mark. But transitions. What I wanted to do was when you go, so each chunk of the world is one screen, one iPhone screen long, and then there's like gateways to different sections of the screen. So that's how the world's gonna be split up, is to these little blocks. And I kind of like that, almost like the classic Zelda style, where you go through and it pops you over to the next screen. You know, it's not a contiguous world, but instead pieces of the world. I think that'll work better on an iPhone, on a mobile screen device, rather than trying to move the world while the player moves their finger. That'll allow a lot more greater range of motion with the user's finger around the screen. But that's it. I mean, I'm very happy with where we're at as far as our timeline goes, as far as working on this stuff, figuring this stuff out. We're going to move some of this stuff to backlog because I'm not going to get it done. I really want to focus on, for the current iteration, finishing up the story arc, or creating a story arc for Mossboro, and finishing up the gameplay environments. I guess one more thing is finish up gameplay environments. What this includes what does this include? Environment, design, world, style, so world technology level, actually. Level, characters, buildings, roads, areas. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. So it includes a whole bunch of stuff in here. And that maybe actually should just be a checkbox. So that's it. And then create story, determine goals, points on across play. All right. So that's what I want to focus on. This Trello board is public, so you can go look at it anytime you want to track kind of progress and how it's going. So you can check it out. That is all for now. Thanks for joining us. This was project management, working on kind of creating the initial tracking of our project up to this point. Thanks, and have a great evening.